Normally when I do my used gaming PCs on the channel here, I don't tend to take too much care with the way they look. Like sure, they never look terrible, I generally buy a new case and take care when putting them together, but they never really stand out. However, today I'm going to be putting together a used gaming PC that not only delivers fantastic value for money for the performance that you get, but also looks phenomenal without having to shell out for a load of pretty components. Hey everyone, this is Frank here, welcome back to Jaeger Tech. So the idea for today's build came about when I first saw the Nova TG here. So this is Bitfenix's tempered glass upgrade edition of their popular budget case, the Nova. And as well as having a tempered glass side panel stuck on the side now, it also has a couple of internal upgrades that give it a bit more of a premium feel. So I definitely recommend this case if you're looking for around that price point. And I paid £40 for it off of Overclockers UK. So the purpose of today's build is, yes, to build a nice looking gaming PC on a budget. But the point is that we can't compromise on the value for money for the performance that you get by spending lots of money on pretty looking components. So I only spent about £5 or £10 more than I would normally spend on a budget case. And we're not going to be spending loads of money on RGB LED strips and custom cables. I mean, we're still going to have those things obviously, but we're going for that good shit off of eBay and AliExpress. And other than that, all we're doing is picking components that go well together in terms of their color scheme. Also, I'm going to be custom painting a couple of the things that I'm putting in here, but even if I didn't, then it would still go together perfectly well. And that's just something I'm doing because I kind of like to do it. So you don't have to bust out the spray cans if you don't want to. Technically, we could give this treatment to basically any configuration we want. The internal components don't necessarily matter. So what I've gone for is what I would recommend as one of the best value for money configurations you can get for 1080p gaming. So at the heart of our system, we have an i5-2320. So this is an LGA 1155 i5 CPU. And I would always recommend these for budget gaming PCs because they just provide such good value for money. So you want 4 cores, 4 threads, and for about 3 GHz or higher, but I wouldn't spend more than £30 on it. I picked this one up locally for only £25. As for the motherboard that the CPU is going to sit in, literally any LGA 1155 board will do. However, of course, we want it to match our color scheme, and the color scheme I've gone for here is like a mostly white and black with some red kind of color scheme, and I managed to pick up this Biostar board off of AliExpress for only £34. Now, people are probably going to trash it because it's a Biostar board, but I really don't think there's any reason to dislike this board just because of its brand name. We don't want a load of features here. We're not overclocking. It doesn't have to be the best quality board. It literally just has to work. Also, not only is it full ATX, which is a real bonus, but it also has USB 3 ports in the front and the rear, which is something you don't see on these motherboards very often. So yeah, pretty happy with this deal here. Of course, our CPU didn't come with a cooler, so I had to pick up an aftermarket cooler. And I managed to get one on sale in Overclockers UK that was not only on sale, but was then further reduced again. And so I only paid £9 for a Tech Themis CPU cooler, which is probably similar to like a Hyper 212 Evo from Cooler Master. It's got a 120mm fan on there. It's gonna have no problem cooling this very low power CPU, and it matches our color scheme. When it comes to RAM, I actually wouldn't recommend spending much money at all on getting fancier looking RAM because it's one of those components that just doesn't show up that much in your build if you have an air cooler on your CPU like a tower cooler like I have. And so I'd recommend probably spending about £20 to £25 on 8GB of RAM, but I ended up getting pretty lucky here because I got this 8GB stick of Kingston HyperX memory that matches our nice black part of our color scheme, and I got it for only £12 from CEX because it was mislabeled as a 4GB stick that I didn't realize until I got home. So yeah, only £12 here, but expect to pay about 20 to 25. For the graphics card, I picked up a GTX 770, which is still really good value for money for 1080p gaming. It has similar performance to the Radeon R9 280 or the GTX 960 or GTX 680. But if you can get a good price on any of those, then I would literally recommend any of them. I managed to get this 770 for only £72. And what I wanted out of the graphics card was for it to have a backplate. Because backplates, let's be honest, they look cool. Also, it's a nice canvas for me to paint on. Storage is always such a personal choice. It really depends what you're comfortable with using. I personally really like an SSD in all of my systems, but if you're happy to wait for loading times, then it really doesn't matter. And today we just went for the super budget option. Literally grab any 500GB hard drive that's SATA and you're ready to go. Pay like £5 to £10 for them. I paid £8 for this one off of CEX, and yeah, 500 gigs is a decent amount of space for a few games as well as your operating system. The power supply is actually something I got a pretty good deal on here. So this is a 400 watt high current gamer from Antec, and I only paid £15 for it. And yes, 400 watts is plenty for this system. It's probably only going to pull about 200 to 250 watts from the wall when under load, and that actually makes it a pretty good matchup for this 400 watt power supply. One problem is that it doesn't have all the connectors we need for our graphics card, so I am going to be using a Molex adapter to get an extra connector to fully power our GTX 770. And no, that's not the best solution, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend using these adapters because it could overload your power supply because it wasn't designed to push that much power, but I know full well that that power supply is going to be fine, so don't worry about it. Along with the case for £40, I also picked up two 30cm LED strips off of eBay for only £2, which LEDs are so cheap on eBay, it's ridiculous. But I would make sure that it has a Molex connector on the end so you can power it from your PC, because some are just bare wire, so that is something to look out for, just to make sure it's there. As for the quality, the adhesive worked surprisingly well, and there's no like blue or yellow tinge to the LEDs, so actually pretty decent quality here, especially for £2. For the custom cables, I went back to AliExpress, our old friend, and I managed to pick up for £17 the 24-pin connector for the motherboard, which was really nice. It's like a red and grey pattern on it. It looks pretty good. And also the two power connectors for our graphics card. So that was one red and one white. And I think it's going to go so nice in our build, especially for like £17 for all those custom cables. Actually really good value. And this brings the total price for the PC up to around the £250 mark, or about $340 US. And I'd say that's actually pretty good value for money. Yeah, you could probably get it a little bit cheaper if you skimped on some components, but I still think we're gonna get really good value for money here when we see the performance. But don't just take my word for it. Let's get into the build and the benchmarks. First of all, a couple of notes on the build process. So you may notice that our paint job looked a lot different than you might have been expecting, and that's because my idea of like intricate masking to make like this really cool like striped effect did not go as planned. Basically the really cheap spray paint coupled with the even cheaper masking tape led to the two having a bit of a disagreement and kind of wrecking the look of my components. That really sucked. It set me back ages. I ended up having to just like sand them down and go with a much blander color scheme of just a grey shroud and a white backplate. So if there's anything to take away from this, it's that if you are a bit more of a novice when it comes to painting, then maybe go for something that's simple like I ended up doing here, just with blanket colors. But of course, you didn't have to spray paint if you didn't want to anyway. One other thing I was concerned about was the cooling, because the Nova, it's not bad, it has one fan in the front and one fan in the back, but that front fan, it is very restricted from the front panel as well as the drive cages on the inside. So I was concerned that especially our graphics card might get a bit hot, and it did heat up a bit, but it was nothing to be concerned about, and I was very comfortable running it even with a mild overclock. So the overclock I put on the graphics card here was just a quick and dirty overclock. It was anything that anyone else can do. I think it was about 140 on the core clock and then 300 or 400 on the memory clock. And I'm pretty sure any GTX 770 should be able to manage that. Just get MSI Afterburner installed and you'll have no trouble whatsoever. And that will give you about a 10 to 15% boost in in-game performance, which is really fantastic considering it costs literally nothing. And as for gaming performance, our PC did pretty damn good. In CSGO, which is more like single CPU core dependent, one fast CPU core, our older i5 didn't do as good as some modern CPUs, but we're still able to get about 170 FPS average, which is a really nice experience. And in those more demanding titles, more graphics dependent, more multi CPU core dependent like Battlefield 1, on Ultra we got over 70 FPS, which is really beautiful to play. PUBG we had to run at medium because the graphics card only has 2 GB of VRAM, so I would only recommend medium at the highest, but even so, the game looked pretty good, and again, we got over 70 FPS average. This is a really good experience in gaming, and of course, Fortnite ran no problem whatsoever as well. It's going to handle all of those popular titles, and even those high-end titles, no problem whatsoever. For a £250 gaming PC, this is pretty good value for money for the performance that you're getting. Yeah, you probably could do a bit better, especially if you took more time to pick up better deals. I really didn't save much money when it comes to picking up the components here, like a few pounds here and there. Like I didn't get bad deals, but literally anyone with a few days collecting components could get this PC for around the same price. Also, what we ended up spending extra to make it look really good was, what, £10 extra on a case, I guess? About £17 on some cables and £2 on some LEDs. So for less than £30, we managed to transform this gaming PC from what would otherwise be a pretty bland setup to something that I think looks phenomenal. Yeah, it's not some custom water-cooled battlestation, but I think the components really fill the case nicely. Everything binds together beautifully, and with that tempered glass side panel, the LEDs and the custom cables, it really does make a spectacular centerpiece for your gaming setup. Well, that's it for today's video, guys. Thank you all very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this one. Please let me know what you thought of this gaming PC down in the comments below, and also let me know if you have any tips or tricks that you like to use to make your PC build stand out more. Of course, I always want to hear what you guys think, and if you haven't already, please check out my channel, have a look at some of my other videos, and consider subscribing. But that is all for today, guys. Thanks again for watching. This has been Frank Jaeger with Jaeger Tech. Have a good one. Because it's one of those components that doesn't show up that much, especially if you have a large heatsink on your CPU. Forgot the heatsink. So for the CPU heatsink,